Namaste and in catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is Dr. Joan Hangarter, otherwise known as Joan of Angels, and we'll get into that and why in just a bit. She is an intuitive, doctorate in chiropractic, an artist, a healer, and an overall interesting person, and you'll find out more about her shortly. Stick with us. Joan, it's really great to have you here. We haven't seen each other for over a decade, and I'm really looking forward to this apocalyptic chat.
Me too. I am very excited to see you.
Oh, wonderful. And ditto. So, as you know, the format of the show, we kind of peer into the depths of how people got in touch with their inner voice, whether it was early, midlife, whenever it happened, what was going on at the time, and how that affected you, and then how you made that practical in your personal and professional lives as a result. Many we don't have these kind of conversations about inner explorations. We're bereft of talking about what goes on inside of us because most of the time we're scared to death somebody's going to think we're weird or nuts or crazy or some such thing, which is the response we often get because there's no direct experience for people to relate to. So we're trying to change that by giving folks a chance to hear others talk about it, make them so that others feel safer and more secure in talking about their own experiences. So thank you for joining us for that. And with that, when did you, because I know, with what you do and the service that you offer to others, you've had to have had a connection since you were really young. What was that like and how did it develop?
Well, when you're young, you don't really know what's happening, honestly. And always had a connection. Like I would lay in bed. I think this is kind of fascinating. I see images in the art, and I'm
Hmm.
a little girl, and I see all of these things. It's like I found myself in the art piece, walking around with these beautiful beings. I didn't give it any thought. I just thought they were friends of mine.
Right.
And I didn't really think about it. But as I grew up, I started to really, not even unconsciously, like I went to a seminar in my 20s, and I was told to like move to LA, move into an ashram. I went to a seminar one night and I said, what should I do with my life? And I heard go to chiropractic school. So I've always had certain amount of guidance that's come to me.
Hmm.
When I
Yeah.
listen, when I pay attention, I got the name Joan of Angels because on October 31st, 2013, I heard a voice that said to me, paint 33 angels in 30 days. And I went, I can't paint like that. And I heard it again, 33 angels in 30
So
days. And
yes, you can, right?
can't do faces. That's so many canvases. Are you crazy? And then I heard the voice again. And ultimately I said yes. And that's how I became named Joan of Angels. So I've always had a communication that does happen in critical times. It doesn't happen all the time,
Sure.
but
Well, it's
I,
non-linear, like life, right?
yeah,
It happens when it needs to. Now, you mentioned as a kid that, or as a child, that you had this wonderful dance, if you will, with other beings and relationships, and it just seemed normal to you, and you never really thought about it not being. And yet we all, as adults, we hear about, oh, kids have imaginary friends, right? We all had imaginary friends. Well, are they imaginary, really? If we're experiencing them, that's our reality.
right. Right. So these were not imaginary friends. They were my friends. I never spoke about it to my family. And but I know that my family always thought that there was something different about me.
Hmm.
Always a dreamer. I always had daydreams. I always felt my dreams were angels. it just was embarrassing. Like, oh my God, I'm that person. So it took me 7 years to step into it. But the truth is, I've never been embarrassed that I connect to my guides or connect to angels or connect to ETs. I was more
Mhm.
embarrassed that the chutzpah of saying, I'm Joan of
Right.
Angels.
Well, one was inside, right? Your connection, that happens internally. And nobody knows it but you, right?
Right.
Unless you share what's going on. Whereas, announcing yourself, that's a totally different thing. And I can completely relate when I first did One World in 1990. Um, my given name's Bruce, so I use Bruce Benefiel as my title, and then my subheading was Zendor, which was the name I was given in meditation a couple of years prior when I asked, "Who am I?" Because I'm adopted and orphaned and adopted, and I still really didn't know who I was, although I was having fun with life anyway. There was still that internal "Who am I?" Well, having that question answered now with the name Zendor, I used that as a subheading. And about 6 shows in, one of my friends on the set, the cameraman, called me Zen. And it just cascaded from there. And I'm telling you, wow, that was so tough to step into initially because I had stuff from the 70s when people were changing their names. Right. And it still carried that a little bit. And here I am faced with the same thing now. Be careful what you judge because you're going to end up on the shoes on the other foot now. So that kind of, wow, it's a kind of a release into a new level of being, isn't it?
Well, Joan of Angels has a high frequency. It's kind of like Joan of Arc Angel. And so when I took that name, I understood that I was raising my angelic template. Let's say I was raising my frequency to a higher dimensional frequency. And so and that also included that, because I've always felt that I'm here to heal and inspire the world to
Hmm.
live their life, follow your dreams, and be your best self. Kind of very simple. Like
Sure.
to believe in yourself. I help people believe in
Yeah,
themselves.
be an excellent human, right?
Yeah, to how to, well, not excellent's an interesting thing, but to live your best version of yourself
Yeah.
and to really live those dreams you've always had. I feel like it's great to have people live their purpose. And even to be able to do it is big for so many people. So Joan of Angels has seemed like a public name to me.
And you mentioned higher dimensional frequency. Can you unpack that a little bit for our audience, what that really
Oh
means?
yeah. So we live on a 3D planet. So everything is, what we can touch, feel, smell, look, and see. But there's the unconscious mind. There's our other higher visions, or that side of us that not only wants to do the best that we can, but always looks for the most beneficial outcome.
Hmm.
Well, it's kind of like your last name. Wait, Benefiel,
Benefiel,
beneficial.
yeah, means good and faithful, actually.
Yeah, so we look for the most beneficial and highest outcome for all beings. And so when you step into the fifth dimension, you have more of a detachment from the aches and pains of this 3D world, and you
Hmm.
step back a little bit to get a clearer perspective of what's going
So it
on.
doesn't really change the physical structure of the world. It's just how you engage it.
Right. And all consciousness is all internal. I
Hmm.
mean, it's all, when you think about all these experiences you have, they're all right in here, that
Well, and yes, there's the brain-mind barrier too, right? Because the mind is much more than just the brain, the infinite intelligence that we're tapped into. And in part of in the research that I found exploring the same things as you are, right? This higher dimensional frequency. What's that really mean? There's a couple of different models. One's experiential and one's a quantum theory model. Um, the experiential was developed by William Swigard back in the 1950s, and it's called multi-plane awareness. And it is a facilitated process that takes people through 9 planes of consciousness, each of them finer and finer in vibratory rate. And then the um, quantum physics model came from Vernon Neppe and Edward Close, and it's got a long name. It's called the um, Triadic Dimensional Distinction Vortical Paradigm. Now, long story short, they posit that consciousness, space, and time are tethered across 9 dimensions. So there seemed to be a corollary there. I even asked Dr. Laszlo about that. And he said, yeah, that's one of the ways that we try to define things so that humans, so that we can understand things, because we tend to break things down, right? It's hard to just be in the isness of the moment, right?
Right.
So how did you find that in your transition from what was happening internally, your playmates, and the response or the reluctance that you had in sharing it with your family? And I get that. That's the whole, don't want to be seen as a little weird, right? How did that eventually transform into you being able to discuss it with others?
Well, I mean, that's a whole life transition. I've gone from being a chiropractor to, so I was a chiropractor most of my life. I'm still a chiropractor. You never stop being a chiropractor. But I transitioned more to always, always wanting to help people in a different way. I felt like I wanted to help women and other people really stand up for themselves and live their best version of themselves. When I was 30, I went to a visioning workshop in Oakland, California. I'll never forget. And I had this vision because she took us into a deep meditation. And I had this vision that I was in the Coliseum and I was dressed as an amazingly beautiful angel. And behind me was an even bigger angel in white, pure,
Mm-hmm.
amazing. And millions of people were walking in front of me. They were crawling, they were in wheelchairs, or they were on crutches, or they were being carried. And they were just going in front of me. And I was just waving this wand, and they were standing up, dropping their wheelchair and moving off to the sunset. And I was told that time that's what I'm here to do. Here to help people let go of their trauma and step into their best life and be healed. And
Mm-hmm.
I've taken that very, very seriously. So I would adjust my patients in my office. I had an office in Berkeley, and I would want to be
That's a
able to
great place to
more.
have a chiropractic office.
Well, it is and it isn't. As I tell everyone, I was very successful. But in Berkeley, everyone wants to adjust themselves. It's a do-it-yourself crowd. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I used to tell, and I did a lot of practice management presentations, and it was like, if I could be successful in Berkeley, where everyone wants to do it themselves, you can be successful anywhere. I always use that as my line. But I also have, when I used to adjust patients, I would end every adjustment with this statement of, we've just turned on your power. We just turned on all the energy in your body. I turned on your power. And I realized about a couple of years ago that I actually say that to my clients when I get off the Zoom call. It's like, we've just turned on your power. How does that feel? We've just turned you up a notch, that energy that you have. And I began teaching people about their vital force and how to turn on your power and how to have more vitality and how to step into that which you want to do. So it's my life's work, really.
Mm-hmm.
I've
So
gone
what
back.
were some of the things that, because with others that are attempting to do the same thing, and this is what I'm hoping to share with the audience, is not just, okay, I've done this, it's how the process, the internal aspect of that, of what you had to deal with internally, how you navigated that journey within in order to meet the external requirements, if you will, of fulfilling it.
Well, that's it's an interesting question because, you just chop wood and carry water. It's like life is about putting one step in front of you and overcoming some of the hits that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Things don't go right, learning how to navigate and keep moving forward. And I was really always motivated by one thing, that vision I had when I was 30. That to me, and I still follow that, I'm still in that vision of how do I actually reach more people and help them really remember who they are and why they're here and do what they came here to do. So I've always been that way ever since I was 30 and had that vision. I haven't left it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still working it. if that makes sense. So
Well, sure it does. It's
yeah,
once you get it, I've been working on mine since 18, so almost 50 years now.
and
Uh,
I'm tenacious. I'm tenacious. I have never given up, even if I wanted to give up, and I went through serious doubts. I went through suicidal moments, where I
That's when you
sat
get the
by,
cosmic two before upside the head, right?
that's
No,
right.
no, no. You need to get back on the path, silly.
And I remember really feeling like a failure and this isn't working and I don't know what to do. And I lost everything. I lost everything twice in my life. So it's not like it was an easy thing, but it was that one vision that helped me overcome everything.
In that trauma to triumph process, what were some of the key elements of it that you found that supported that the connection you had and the willingness to trust and take the steps that were laid out before you, even though you may not,
Well,
know what the results were going to be, that you still get those inner promptings, right? I think we all do. It's that still small voice that we all have that we often second guess or just dismiss completely.
well, I have trained myself to listen to that voice, and I teach people how to listen to that voice because that voice is the most accurate guide to your life. And
Hmm.
if you can trust your gut, then you not only get the answers to everything, you can find your life purpose, and it could save your life in an emergency because you don't
Absolutely.
argue with that voice, So learning how to differentiate that, I've had a lot of hard knocks when I did not listen, and I tell the classic story. I leave my accountant's office in 2013 and I have my kids and I our tax returns in our hand, a copy. All I can say is thank God the guy, sent it over by Wi-Fi to the IRS because I get to my car, it's a rental. I open the trunk, I hear a voice that says, "Don't put your returns in the trunk." And I actually probably said it out loud. Are you crazy? What do you mean? Because that's crazy. And I heard the second part. It's like, oh, the trunk's going to blow open and everything's going to fly away. And I said, that's even crazier. And I don't believe it. And I put my tax returns in the trunk. Swear to God, I was at a light. It blew open. I stopped short. Everything blew away. It was one of those busy highways. You can't get out without killing yourself. So I couldn't get out. By the time I pulled over, of course, they were gone. And a few days later, I get a phone call from an LA Public Works guy who said, I have your daughter's social security number. And he said mine got lost. Well, someone on the planet has my social security number because the IRS has let me know that. And so is T-Mobile. So I did not listen. And after that, I began to more seriously pay attention to the messages I get. And
How do they show up? What are the precursors, and what in that moment is it like in your own being? What do you sense and feel?
depends what I'm hearing. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, and I hear things differently. So I'm clairsentient, clairaudient. I'm not clairvoyant. Good psychics are clairvoyant. I'm not psychic. I'm intuitive. So if I'm hearing a voice, like a command like that, don't put your returns in the car, in the trunk, I will hear it like almost like a voice. When I was told to go to chiropractic school, I heard it as a voice in my head. It was like, what should I do with my life? And it was like, go to chiropractic school.
Now, is it your voice?
No, it's not my voice. I know that it's not my own thought. That much I do know. And now if it's more clairsentient, which is how you know because you know because you know,
Hmm.
I can tell you, I just know. Like there are things I just know. I know it automatically. And that has to do, it could be politically, I know, or health wise, I know, and I just know things. And that's also very empowering to just know things.
Sure.
And that's not a voice. And then if I'm hearing a collective, which I will hear occasionally, I'll hear that from above. Otherwise, I hear it from here.
So a collective, is that like multiple voices in one?
Yeah, from what I understand, it's a group, like
Okay.
a group message to me. I don't get them as often as I would like, but I have had that. And then I've noticed that it's up here.
Yeah, I've had similar things. Sometimes it's a voice. I've had an experience where multiple voices as one, and then the visions as well. And like I had mentioned my experience and prior to meeting my wife Luba, this how we're led into the better places for us. May not be the perfect place yet because we're still kind of sort of in resistance, right? We're always wondering and curious and bit critical sometimes, like you mentioned. Hey, come on, why really? That's nuts, right? And yet, when it shows up, it's not demanding too much, is it? It's just a subtle impression, like you say, that intuition, the gut feeling.
It's a subtle impression, but the way I break down intuition when I teach it to my students is the following. You get an intuitive flash, then you have to interpret it. First, you have to acknowledge that you heard it.
Hmm.
Okay, you have to kind of repeat it to yourself.
Yeah, can't
And
put the paste back in the tube.
right, because it's very subtle. It is so
Hmm.
subtle that the art, like it's an art form to even hear it.
Hmm.
And go, oh, that was a thought. Okay, that was like a weird thought. But then you have to interpret what it means. And then you have to act upon it or not act upon it. So there's like it's a three-step process with what goes in. So when I do readings, for example, this is how I learned how I do. I didn't know how I do it. But then I ultimately saw a little choo-choo train. It started off as a little caboose. And on the caboose was a word or an image. And it would just go this past me. And if I was able to catch it and say it out loud to the person, then I had the right place. I was in the right place to read them and
Hmm.
to work with them. If I missed that subtle thing, I could never connect with them because I hadn't heard what I was being shown. And it's usually what I'm shown. And so my friend Alan Steinfeld, I don't know if you know Alan, but when he
I do.
teaches remote viewing, he says it all the time. It's that whisper. It is that whisper. And when you learn to hear it and recognize it, when you slow down enough, then you will hear it. Or it could be subtle, then, like you're driving and you get this voice that says turn left, and you go, but that's the long route. I don't want to go left, and then you continue and you discover you in 6 hours of traffic.
Hmm.
And then you go, oh, I should have listened to that voice. So I teach people how to pay attention to all those messages so you can start to track them and you can find out how accurate that voice within really has been for
Sure,
you.
and that's how discernment develops. You test your truth, right? How else can you do it, right? If
Right.
you listen, put the truth to test. That's what it loves.
Yes, and it's not always easy. So if you're a doctor and you've been trained in one way, someone comes in with symptom ABC and you give them, D, but suddenly you feel it's not working and you get another instinct, then for a medical doctor, there's that learning how to trust that inner voice again.
Right, right. I did a show in I'm sorry, it triggered a memory with a guy named Terry Friedman. He actually had an ABC special done on the regressions that he did with one of his patients. Now, he was an allopathic doctor that converted to holistic and alternative medicine and was using past life regressions. Also, woman came to him, chronic ulcer, been to all kinds of doctors, that kept getting worse. And so he thought, well, let's just try this and suggested doing a past life. And she said, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. So he took her under
And he
and
didn't know either.
no, no, well, you don't till you get there, right?
Yeah.
It's just that opportunity. And so he takes her back, and she is with a group of people in France during the Inquisitions, and they capture her. The soldiers capture her and her entire group, and they put her on the back of a wagon and run a hot spear through her abdomen. And
Mm.
she came out of it the first time just hysterical. By the 10th time, the ulcer was gone. She came out of it. She just watched it happen. So that emotional attachment, that cord that had lasted centuries,
Mm.
was now gone. So that is one way that past lives, I really feel. And like I said, he was spent the 10 years in, medical training to get his license and go into practice, and then converted, or included.
Included.
And it was so profound that ABC actually did a special on it. So these kinds of things we do have a history of. It's just we don't necessarily know that it's there because it's kind of well hidden, unless you're
Well,
looking for it.
it's well hidden because our society doesn't want us to use our intuition. It doesn't want us to connect to source or hear the voice of the divine.
I don't know if it's that. I can see how it might be perceived that way, and that's a one perspective. However, we don't know it's there because we don't practice it. And so if we don't, I don't know that it's that they're necessarily trying to dumb us down because they don't know that it's there either, right?
Well, yes, I'm thinking about my son's high school and the
Hmm.
football team. And the year that the football team, the senior team, they had a new coach, and the coach started meditation.
Mm.
And so before their practice, I guess they meditated, and they came in almost number one in California. They went to the final. They played in the final. I don't know if they won, no, they didn't win, but they came so close. And it was because he had instituted meditation and some of these alternatives that they don't open in school. You say, well, why don't they, they don't know about it, which is why they don't. But they don't know about it because when you bring up subjects like
They don't want to
angel
listen.
or near death
Yeah.
experiences or connecting to angels, that you're poo-pooed. It's one of those subjects that you're not allowed to really go into.
And it's not, I find it's not necessarily because I've stepped back a little bit. It's like, okay, why is this happening? Direct experience, when the direct experience is lacking and there's this critical nature of the unknown, when you hear something that's so far out of your realm of direct experience, it's really hard to grok,
Right.
right?
Right. So most people don't trust what they hear because that trust has not been taught, that it's acceptable to listen. Now, I'm a Pisces, so honestly, I didn't have those considerations. I just heard what I heard and I was excited because it gave me confidence. And I have always followed that voice
Yeah,
most of the time.
yeah. It's I've heard the voice, my particular voice among others, but the first one showed up just after I found out I was adopted at 4.5. They brought my sister home. And my parents decided it was time to tell me about being adopted. Because here's, they told me she was coming, no pregnancy, at 4.5, you don't know. And so they told me that the whole process of adoption and how I was loved, there was never a question of how much they loved me, and that just wasn't there. However, because of that, and yeah, I had one wonder about my biologicals and why they gave me up. But the overriding question that I had was, if I have a father and mother in heaven, can I talk to them?
Wow.
And for 4.5 year old, I know that's kind of, I don't know why I just did, right? So I don't know if it was a week or a month later, I'm standing on the landing, looking out through the window on looks out over the front porch with my elbows in the windowsill and chin in my hand. And all of a sudden, it was nighttime, nobody else around. All of a sudden, I hear this, "Hey, you." And I knew it was talking to me. It was so loud, a big booming male voice that was all powerful and yet warm and fuzzy at the same time. And instead of engaging it, I spun around and I called out to my mother, who was sitting 15, 20 feet away watching TV. I knew the voice didn't come from the TV. And I said, "Mom, do you hear that voice?" And she goes, "What voice?" I said, "That voice. It says, 'Hey, you.'" You can imagine 4.5 year old trying to talk deep, right? And so she says, "No, I didn't hear any voice. Must have been a peeping Tom." And at that point, I realized, okay, I can't deny what I heard. And that wasn't
Mm.
a peeping Tom. And so I began to, at night, I would stand in front of windows and I would send that voice out, lights on in the house so that I couldn't see outside. And I would stand and wait for it to come back. And of course, as a kid, well, we have 70,000 thoughts a day, they say. So even after you ask a question or you do something, your mind's rambling about all kinds of other stuff. Well, I finally got to the point where I sent it out and I was still, I was quiet. And instantly I heard it. And so I learned that place of stillness, found it randomly just because I happened to shut up and yet that began everything. And that's at 18, that same voice asked me if I was willing to die for what I believed in. And that was cosmic consciousness. And shortly thereafter, I had an experience of cosmic consciousness. And then when I came back into my body, I retained the sensation and the awareness that we're all cosmic consciousness condensed into form. We're just unaware. And that happened at 18. So who are you going to talk to?
Right. I like that they asked you if you were ready and you had already had
I had
precognition.
some tutelage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was ready. Not everybody else was, especially my parents. And it was one of those, excruciatingly fun experiences overall that got me in touch and made me realize, oh, there is more and I can be that. And it's a gradual thing, like you've noticed. How did you find in that those transitions from one profession to another and you didn't really leave any of them behind, did you? It's just they began to layer upon each other and they were all brought out when necessary. How did that process work and did you notice it happening?
Well, so when my patients would come in, let's just start with my practice itself.
Mhm.
I discovered that my hands knew what to do. My brain did not know what was going on half the time, but my hands did. My hands would just automatically find that spot and then I'd poke at it and they'd go, Joan, how did you know that I hurt there? And I said, well, I just let my fingers walk and then they find where they're to
You let
go.
your fingers do the walking, huh?
Yes, and I would say, I'm like the yellow pages. My
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
fingers do
exactly.
the walking. And this would happen over and over and over again. And I did, through the hands-on healing, get a lot of messages. So for instance, one day I'm putting this new patient down on the table and I hear a voice that says, if anyone's ever going to sue you, it's him. I mean, I got very specific messages. And I thought to myself, well, his wife was upstairs. That's a little crazy. And so I very delicately palpated, his back. And I don't even know if I did anything. I might have. Anyway, he screamed. He started screaming, "You've hurt me, you've hurt me, you've hurt me." And I ended up having to call 911 and send him to the ER. And but I had heard that voice. And by the way, I didn't hurt him, just so you know, and he sued me in small claims court. And what are the odds that the judge was the husband of a patient of mine? So but I heard that voice and I think I started hearing that and recognizing that in my practice too. I would intuitively know what was wrong with someone even if they didn't tell me, or I would feel it. And
Mhm.
I did a lot of hands-on healing. And then I stopped practicing because I was injured. So I actually gave up my Berkeley practice, but I still practice occasionally. And now I practice more what my friends told me should be called esoteric chiropractic. And that's when I can do it on Zoom or in person, but I don't really manually adjust anyone. I just use energy and I guess I just use energy.
Well, that's
And
all we are, right? I
yeah,
mean,
and that's all we are. So I now do esoteric chiropractic. And I'm good at knowing, like, I can usually help people figure out what they need for their body because I'm all about how do you turn your body on from the inside out.
mhm. But the point that you just made and I validate, we are just energy. Um, stuck my foot in the mouth, made the silly mistake of telling, Irvin Laszlo, I said, according to quantum physics, we're 99% space and 1% material. And he says, I would say we're 100% energy. And when he said that, it was like, oh,
Well,
yeah,
that's true too. Yes.
absolutely.
And we're not solid. We think we're solid, but just like this cup is made up of atoms that are in slow motion, which is why it looks solid.
Hmm.
All of our atoms may be in slow motion, but they're still vibrating at
Well,
a
and it's
resonance.
intentionally a
Mhm.
cup.
It's intentionally a cup, yes, because of its shape. But for instance, last year I went to a spoon bending class.
Hmm.
Learned how to bend a spoon with your mind. And I was successful at it. It's kind of like the Matrix, the scene with the Oracle and the boy
Sure.
and
Oh,
you
yeah, yeah, yeah.
bending a spoon. And it's like there is no
Oh,
spoon.
Uri Geller got famous for doing that.
Yes. So when I sat there, I couldn't get the spoon to move until I started remembering that it's all atoms. And then I started to see the atoms expanding. And then once I saw the atoms expanding, my spoon bent.
Now, to go to that place, that's an amazing visual, right? Of being able to see the atoms. That's a really deep level of consciousness to be able to get there, right? How did you navigate to that place? What process did you go through to allow yourself to enter that zone, if
Well,
you
first of all, I was frustrated. Everyone else had been bending that spoon. So you have to get that I had this attitude that this should be easy for me.
I
And
can't imagine a Piscean with attitude.
right, I had an attitude like this can be simple. It's all I'm a natural at it. So everyone else was bending that spoon before me. And I was frustrated and I was a little pissed, pissy because I didn't get it. I was the same way with my pendulum too. It took me, until I got it. But I just I don't know that vision. I remembered the Oracle scene. I remembered the scene with the guy in the Matrix. And I said, okay, it's not existing in the form that I'm seeing it in. And I just started to expand the spoon. Just saw, use the art of visualization and saw these cells moving.
Hmm.
And that's how I did it. I can only tell you that much. I want to keep going back, though. I do want to go back because I want to train my mind because these people are teaching you how to not only use your mind to bend a spoon, but what if you can teleport this pen to the other side of the room? Or what if we can use the skills that they had in the Middle Ages, the in the great. So up in Tibet, in the monasteries, many of those men in the monasteries were able to teleport. It was very common. It
Well,
was
and they used
common.
horns and their psychokinetic abilities to move the blocks into place when they were building
Right,
the temples. Bayard Spalding, who's buried here in Tempe, took a group of scientists to Southeast Asia in the 20s in search of the monks. They'd heard that they lived to be 600 to 800 years old. And they wanted to go figure out how and if it was
right.
true, and then how. And so he write what teach life and teachings of the great masters of the Far East, I think is what the series of books became. But they explain all of the different really wild stuff that they experienced that had no Western explanation.
And therein lies the paradox, okay?
Hmm.
Because we call ourselves the most advanced civilizations, and those Eastern ones, I don't know what we call them anymore, but we always considered ourselves superior.
Mhm.
That superiority blocks our consciousness from even accepting that you can connect to your guides or accepting that you can teleport or turn wine into water. So
Yeah.
the American or the Western mind is very rigid, and because it's stuck in that logical paradigm, it is very rigid. But if you can let that go and release it, yeah, you can accomplish almost anything, and everything is possible,
Oh,
even
yeah.
including going through walls. Those are skills we've had in the past when we had a different mindset and we learned to manipulate matter or energy, and we believed it was possible.
I wondered about that for some years. And as a teenager, I had an experience of bilocating, woke a guy up out of bed 2,000 miles away, and also called in another gal who was in the opposite direction. He was in northern Canada. I was in Muncie, Indiana. She was in Santa Barbara at a Krishna camp there. And all three of us, I brought us all together. And the following weekend, he comes back. It was because I'd been trying to get in touch with him. It was fall quarter in college. I was in my second year, and he was supposed to be returning. So he comes back, and the first thing that I asked him is, "Did you catch any flack last weekend?" I wasn't sure. Right? It could have been my imagination. And he looks at me square in the eyes. He said, "Yeah, you son of a bitch, you woke me up out of bed." What? He said, "Yeah,
Wow.
I was laying in
Wow.
bed. Somebody grabbed my shoulders, sat me up. I opened my eyes up. There was your face. Behind your face was Carolyn's face. I talked to you for a while. You split. I went back to bed." A week and a half later, a postcard came in the mail to him of a Krishna camp with all the addresses along the side. Santa Barbara was circled. Besides his address, the only thing it said in Carolyn's handwriting was "enjoyed the conversation."
Wow.
We were 19. Now, fast
Wow.
forward 1989, I'm at a friend of mine's house in Prescott over Christmas, and maybe it was even New Year's. And I'm staying in one part of the house. It's an old farmhouse, one bathroom on the far side of the house from where my bedroom was at. And I get up in the middle of the night, have to go to the bathroom. There was an archway in front of my bedroom door. It's pitch black, new moon, couldn't see anything. I open the door, take 2 steps, run into a wall. And I look around for a light switch and I flip it on. I'm standing in front of the bathroom door on the other side of the house. I had no idea how that happened. It's just that instantly I was there because they didn't know I couldn't, I guess.
Got it. So you just saw yourself there and you were there. So it's very possible. It's these laws of nature can be bent in many ways, and we can travel. It's all true. Time travel, they've proved, is true as well, going back or forward. Tremendous new advances in healing are coming out forward that can totally restore your body to its original template. So we're on the verge of, I think, bringing all of this technology back out again.
Mm-hmm.
And
And those technologies that mentioned are all mostly sonic, right? They're frequency.
all about frequency and vibration, sound, frequency, and vibration. Yes.
So maybe we're able to help everybody increase their uh, level on the Hawkins scale. Right?
Maybe. Yes, that has always been one of my goals, to raise the frequency wherever I am.
Hmm. Now, in the throes, how do you see coming out of the pandemic? And for me, let me preface it by this. For me, now I'd like to have your view of what you see, what you saw happening during it, and what you see on both ends of the spectrum coming out of it.
Well, to break it down, so when the pandemic first happened, it was called Corona,
Mhm.
and I got very excited because Corona means light. And so it was light going viral. And I thought, this is crazy. They've named this quote disease after light going viral, because Corona is that crown and it's that full light. And I
Mhm.
got very excited, which actually told me there's more to this than I knew. Now, going through the pandemic, I felt that we were in a cocoon, that we were in a grand initiation, that we were all collectively going through an initiation process, and that staying at home, that was a huge cocoon, that if you used it properly, you could shift your energy, go through your transition, and come out the other side. So we are coming out of that cocoon, and people are very excited about, living their life again and being out and being with community. There is that. But what I see is that there's a general anxiety now, that there's a lot of distress on the planet. There's a lot of conflict that hasn't been resolved. There's a lot of divisiveness that came through the last few years that have
A
never
lot of
been.
trauma drama.
A lot of it, and people are traumatized. There's actually a subtle acute traumatic stress syndrome, I think globally, at least in the Western nations, at least in our country. And so that allowed even a lot of mass programming where people stopped questioning everything. So we have a whole group of people that stopped questioning, and we have a whole group of people that started questioning that hadn't questioned before.
Right.
So we're actually in a really unique experience. I don't want to say anything that gets me banned off of your channel, but
Don't worry
no,
about it. So far, so good. I haven't
you
had
know
any
what?
problems whatsoever.
One of my shows on YouTube was just taken down, and it was called like 420 Spiritual Living, and that was taken down because I talked about the ability of plant medicine to help heal,
Hmm.
and I used that word heal, and you're not allowed to use that anymore. But for me, I feel like there's more and more people that are waking up slowly, and there's a dichotomy here of those who are awakening and those who aren't, and it's huge. It really is actually a big division. Some of these people on this side are going to slowly wake up more, but now we're going into a new era where there's going to be new medicine techniques, new medical technologies coming out, new financial system. Life is going to be much different and hopefully healthier is the
Mhm.
best way I want to say it.
Well,
Healthier.
ultimately, we're on the rise, and thank you. That was a really wonderful synopsis of the sight and the intuition that you have about that process. And I see it, I describe it a little differently because, having a little different perspective, 'cause maybe it's male, maybe it's, something else. And what I saw was that in this, it was behavior modification, right, en masse.
En masse.
And the obsession of self-hygiene, which was pummeled upon people, along with the sequestration, gave us all a chance to self-examine, which is what you're talking about, where we learned how to trust ourselves more, question, be curious, and like, this doesn't feel right. And I know it didn't feel right to anybody. It's this there are some is like, okay, I'm going to discover why this doesn't feel right instead of cowering in the fear of it not feeling right and trying to follow the prescriptive activities that were being pummeled on people through the media. Um, what I found, though, the silver lining was that, yeah, we did move forward. You and I are meeting because of that, because now we're looking for each other and how to express, how to share, how to have conversations to bring out this healing capacity that we have through whatever, whether it's plant medicine or, co-counseling or readings or coaching or whatever that's there. Each path that a person is on, those things are available to them if they just start asking for them and pay attention to what's showing up, because the doors will open for them. Now, as you're talking about the disparity, how do you see those who have, let's say, increased their awareness and are trying a different way, that they're working on creating an actual new normal for themselves without trying to drag the past and call it new, like the New World Order, right? They're just putting a facade on the old way and they're trying to say it's something new. Well, no, a new world order has got to be new. Well, what could be new? That we begin trusting our gut, that there's a natural vibration that we can all tap into that nurtures us. That I find it's kind of so simple, it's ridiculous. Our basic desire is to love and be loved,
Right.
and we dismiss it.
We do dismiss it because we don't, as people, have confidence in our own voice and our own wisdom. And even during the pandemic, we were being told what to do about our health, as opposed to, and what we had to do, as opposed to letting people go, I have a unique body. My body knows what it needs.
Mm.
And I'm going to listen to my body because we're so disconnected from our body. One of the first books I read many years ago was You Are What You Eat by Adele Davis. And that blew me away. It was like, are you kidding? I am what I eat. And I'm not unusual. Like, especially Americans don't have any concept that what you eat fuels your body or
Right.
fuels your mind, what you watch, what you speak, what you
And
say.
it's all of the earth. So
And
we,
it's all of the
in
earth.
essence,
Yes.
are the earth incarnate.
And that's because people have forgotten who they are. So
Yeah.
some of my work now is in helping people remember who they are and remembering different soul aspects of themselves. And I do this kind of work now, which is a combination of soul retrieval, soul aspect defining, and helping people actually be able to visualize. And I create art around this so you can see who you've been, who you are, what your potential is, what your skills are, so you can actually see how extraordinary you are as a human being or
Mm.
as a soul, and actually find your soul, because that's even gotten lost in the mix here. So I have developed, really dedicate myself now to helping people find that soul aspect of themselves so that they can step into it and claim that best version of themselves now.
Do you find that with this understanding of oneness, right, that we're all divine threads in the tapestry, that the natural order that's emerging from a soul level that we are designed to be is beginning to surface, or the query of that? Because we often, we listen to others as far as what kind of life we're supposed to have, right? And so we try to meet the needs of what others think we ought to be, unless we are, seen as rebels and we're like, I'm going to do it my own way. Like, um, brings up a song, right? I'll do it my way.
Oh, yeah.
So in doing that,
Thank you.
yeah, exactly. Uh, how does one wrestle with that awareness and be able to acknowledge that, okay, there is a perfected form, fit, and function for me, theoretically, based on that assumption that we're all part of that divine tapestry. So we all got to fit together somehow, which means we're really finely tuned in how we integrate with each other, and the skill sets, the intelligence, the emotional intelligence, as well as IQ. Um, and the skill sets that we have, as well as the particular mission that we may have. And I think mission is often misunderstood as, this grandiose thing. Doesn't have to be. It could be that your mission is to fulfill, a minuscule detail in your community, as long as everybody is in sync and harmonious as a result. Because we don't have to be sitting on a pedestal. And matter of fact, it's best if we're not, because we're all equal in that sense. We just have different assignments, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It makes a lot of
How
sense.
how do you see that, if in your world, and how might you explain it from your perspective?
So I see the planet itself, Gaia, as Mother Earth, as an orchestra. And you're an instrument, I'm an instrument.
Mhm.
Everyone's an instrument. And learning how to be in tune. So just like an orchestra, if all of the instruments are out of tune, it's not going to sound good. Let's face it, it's going to sound discordant. And so if we tune ourselves up, then we have we have great music. Let's put it
Mhm.
that way. And so that's kind of how I see all of us on the planet and our
We have a
role.
symphony instead of a cacophony.
Yes, a symphony instead of cacophony. It's such a great way to put it. Yes. And in a sense, that is the key to the planet's evolution and ascension,
Mhm.
is that the more of us that step into our power, that kind of align with our higher self, or that listen to the voice within, the more of us that align our frequency and raise it, like you mentioned, power versus force, and raise our frequency, then we positively help people next to us. And if they tune up their instrument, then the person that way is going to, everyone is going to
Mhm.
keep paying it forward.
Right.
And we ultimately can have an earth that's in harmony.
And part of that, do you find, is the self-deprecation, self-judgment, the stuff that we hold or that we don't necessarily, imposter syndrome as well, right? Those kinds of things that minimize our capacity to, for lack of a better, ascend. And,
Yeah.
and that,
Because we're born onto a planet of forgetfulness, where our memory is wiped clean. People say to me, Joan, what's my purpose? And I say, well, your first purpose is to remember that you came down here, you volunteered here, you had a reason and a purpose. You have a clipboard. I like to always use my clipboard, and say you have a clipboard that has all the skills you need on it. It's all listed, all the tools you came down here with. You even, look, it says here, you're going to be able to bilocate and astral travel. And these are all your potentials here. And this is your mission. And so it's about remembering what we have on that clipboard, like really who we are, and then learn to use those skills in a sense. It's a simplified version of it, but
yeah. Now, what about embracing the cacophony? Because oftentimes we want to fix it, and that's pushing or pulling energy. And in what we're dealing with, it's all about flow, right? The pushing and pulling just doesn't work.
well, I think that's true. You do have to embrace it. You do have to, just like people say, well, where am I on my path? I feel like I'm not on my right path. We're all at the exact right spot at the right time. And wherever you are right now is exactly where your soul and you chose to put there until
Hmm.
you make a shift or a change, or until it's not working for you anymore. So we're at that exact point in our evolution where we should be. And now if we can pay attention to the activation moments and say yes, when you hear a voice that says paint 33 angels saying you can say yes,
Right.
you'll get to, and it's in that yes that we change our life, by the
Sure.
way.
Yeah, it's where
They
we put
hold
our
out,
the focus of attention, intention, and interaction.
right, right. Yes, well
Yes.
said.
Thank you. Worked on it for years. Right. I mean, at our age, we've had a lot of experience doing this. And so what we're attempting to do now is share that with the upcoming generations, because a lot of our generation, um, as you mentioned before, they're caught in that prescriptive notion because they've wanted to trust exterior sources as experts rather than trust themselves.
Right. And let's face it, part of our lesson in this life is to learn to trust ourselves. To learn to believe that we have all the answers we need for ourselves, that our body is equipped to self-regulate and self-replicate and um and really work to heal itself.
Mhm.
So all good, all good. It's a beauty. And say, where are we in 2024? It's a beautiful time.
It
A
is.
lot is unfolding. I think there's a lot of chaos in the now with politically, but I do believe we're unfolding, and we are going to see ourselves and the planet shift into where people like you and I have always wanted it to go.
It certainly seems it's headed that way. And even with the Mayan calendar, which, when we first met, it was just prior to the
All right,
solstice
2012.
2012, right? And Jose Arguelles became a friend. I'd met him in 97, he and his wife Lloyd Dean, and we became good friends. We corresponded quite a bit. And in our initial conversation, we were talking about, okay, what's all this harmonic convergence about? Because in 1987, during that harmonic convergence, I was on my way to work at an aerospace company. I was a production control coordinator in charge of $7 million a month. And I'm listening to the radio and I hear something about the harmonic convergence, and my gut started quivering. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm paying attention. What's going on? So I called the radio station. They told me where to find some stuff, one of which was an interview with Jose from Meditation Magazine. So I got a copy of that, took that with us. We went up north to Sedona. And then in So when I met him in 97, it's like, okay, I wanted to meet him, right? So here it is happening. And in that conversation, we discussed, okay, this is the escalation of consciousness from the opening of the harmonic convergence, a 50-year window with the apex at the solstice of 2012. So 87 to 37 with that apex where the ascension of consciousness and awareness was at its peak. Now, what do we do with that? Because we expected a lot of stuff, or some expected things to happen. What it did was it changed the inner structure of humanity with this new awareness and those who were able to garner it. Now, what happens with that? Well, you carry it with you, right? And what you do anywhere, you do everywhere, as according to T. Harv Eker, right? So you carry this with you, which means every environment you go into when you're in a now moment, your aura is almost 100 feet in diameter, whether you realize it or not, just by being in a present moment. A practiced meditator is probably, can exponentiate that. What it does, though, is it allows everything that is not in accordance with this new vibratory level to come to the surface for review.
Right.
And so right now, we're still seeing all this cacophony happening in the world that has come up to the surface. And instead of ignoring it, now with all this intercommunication that's happening via the net and other sources, we're all speaking up about it and things are changing so that we are preparing for this introduction into the age of Aquarius in fine fashion, I hope, because we still got, what, 15 years or 14 years, 13 now, it's 24. I'll get there. I time dilation. So how do you see this transition in the unfolding of what is to come and what's your intuition say as to what we might be looking for and paying attention to en masse to support this transition in the most positive way that we can?
I don't know how to answer that. There's going to be a change in healthcare on our planet. There's going to be a change in transportation and in free energy and in some of the new practices. There's going to be a huge shift in the medical world and corporate structure and financial. So I don't know how it's going to evolve, but I do know that people want more to be self-determined again. They want to be able to take their health, their life in their own hands. They wanted to take their education in their own hands. Schools are going to change. What they're teaching is going to change. And it's going to be more holistically organic, more holistically people-oriented as opposed to corporate-oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to be the rise of humanity and some of the best versions of ourselves. And I think they will find new creative ways to clean up the air and the water and the food, and then the food. I think the biggest issue we have now is also how toxic our food is. So even that's going to undergo a new shift.
Agreed. And it's obvious, it seems, from how we're beginning to address things. And if one is online, let's say, and not everybody is, and so this is a challenge, but for those who are, there are multiple groups that are now ascending into, cyberspace that are equipped with people with the skill sets that are looking to be these helpful
Right.
servant leaders, in organizational development and the leadership realm. Servant leadership is now one of the greatest focuses because
And
it
people stepping
includes,
into their power. Right.
yeah, it's about, how the servant leader pays attention to everybody around them. Kind of like the
Right.
old Zig Ziglar, you do enough for others that you're going to get for yourself eventually. So,
Right.
and that's true, right? If
We're
you're,
going to be needed.
yeah,
What we have to offer and teach and the wisdom that we carry as wisdom keepers is going to be needed now. And more of us are going to be needed who know, because these newbies or these people just waking up or the people still asleep, there is going to be some trauma here on the planet. It's not going to be an easy shift
Mm,
of
true.
dissolution, and they're going to need our wisdom. They're going to need to have their hands held to know that this is all unfolding for the highest good of all.
Yeah. You know,
So we're in exciting times.
I agree. And it's exciting for me, especially with all the guests that I've had. And one of the things I noticed in One World when I did it in the 90s is that there's a common thread, right? There's a golden thread that runs through it all of how people are seeing the evolution of the future being bright. They don't
Yeah,
necessarily know how it's going to happen. Almost 160 interviews now, and that is the overriding theme of them all, which
right,
is what I was curious to
right.
find out.
Yep,
Now, granted, each person speaks differently, and somebody might understand you that wouldn't understand, somebody else, and so there's this smattering, if you will, of different ways that everybody's expressing it, and hopefully it lands on some, and they can benefit from it.
right.
I mean, it's been such a pleasure to recap and reconnoiter and have this reconnection. I really appreciate it.
It's been a wonderful hour. It's been a great chance to kind of express what's going on and catch up.
Mm.
I've really enjoyed that and enjoyed talking to you. You definitely have. You come from a different side than I had come. You come from, the scientific world, your job that you were telling me about. It's sort of just a different perspective, whereas I come from the more woo-woo world. I think I was born woo-woo. I couldn't help myself.
Well, I have to admit, I have my woo-woo side, and it's probably more prevalent. I just don't talk about it as much, and yet I do. Like the bilocation, the teleportation, the voices I heard. I rely on these things. It's just me. It's my
Right.
life. Why would
Right.
I
You just
want
don't
to
tell
hide that,
everyone. Mm-hmm.
right? And yet there is that science and math side. So the two, there's a good balance there because it all has to become practical and pragmatic. In other words, the
Right.
spiritual and the scientific have to merge and say the same thing or similar. Otherwise, it's pretty useless because there's still, it seems like there's a gap,
Right.
right? Until you connect those dots and the
Right.
logic flows and it's not necessarily going to be linear, right? Life is not linear
No.
by any stretch of the imagination, and yet there's all of I can't say all, many people believe that is, you go to work, you come home, you do all these things, but there's no inner life with that, and the inner life is what goes into the nonlinearity and the multidimensional realities and the dream visions and all those kinds of things. And everybody's got different eyes and ears. It just depends on the questions they ask and how their receptors work.
Right. Right. And why they're here.
Yeah. So what kind of parting insight, intuitive notion, advice might you give to those who are seeking to connect with themselves, such as you've been and we have been talking about?
Well, that's a good question. I'm kind of thinking about what I really want to tell people. You're here for a reason. And and part of that reason is just to be part of this awakening and stepping into your greatest potential. And so the energy on the planet right now is geared toward you learning how to step into your greatest potential and to share and live with those gifts that you have. And so now more than ever is the time to say yes. These are the times for which we've been called. These are the times for which we're waking up and we're doing this work. And this is your time. That knock on the head, I got to paint 33 angels in 30 days. People are getting that knock on their head now, not to paint 33 angels, but to step up,
Do
to
something.
share your vision, to help others, to do something different. And if you're feeling that kind of energy, know that that's healthy. That's exactly what's being called for. and, reach out to Zen, reach out to me for support in your next steps, because when you're in that state and you don't know what to trust, then sometimes if you need clarity, reach out. That's what I want to say. Reach out. That's my specialty. That's what I've been doing ever since I discovered there was a need for it, which is
Mhm.
very young. I had my own need to figure it out.
Right.
And so
Because we all
this is
do.
yeah, and this is the time. All of, everything Zen's saying about 2012 and everything is culminating now up until 2030. There's a huge grand awakening that's been scheduled to happen and shift the planet into the higher frequencies, meaning that it'll be more enlightened. People would be more optimistic. The food actually could get healthy again.
Mhm.
The air could be healthy. The water could be healthy. We can have free energy from the sun. We could lay down in a med bed and be healthy again, get our original body back. And all it takes is you to say, yes, I will.
And
Yes,
if you
I'm
don't believe it, don't believe a thing we've said.
right.
Test it yourself. Ask the questions that are pertinent and let the answers come to you, because nothing we can say, no books, CDs, movies, teachers are going to do you a hill of beans of good if you're not willing to question it on your own and be quiet and listen to the answers.
Right. Well said. Well said. Absolutely, Zen.
Cool. Joan, thank you so much again for showing up and being here to share you. It's been wonderful.
I've been honored. I was so excited when I saw you on LinkedIn last month, and but you've been popping up in other places too. You have been popping up, and so I'm so glad we got to have the chat. This has been great. I've learned a lot more about you, and hope you've learned more about me.
Certainly have. And thank you again. And namaste and in la catch. And thank you for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host, and I will see you next time.